The BBC News at 10 o'clock with Huw Edwards.
Tonight at 10, a last-minute legal battle to stop a flight from the UK from taking asylum seekers to Rwanda. The plane is standing by, reportedly with just 4 passengers on board. There's still no departure time confirmed. The Prime Minister says the policy is justified.
We think it's a sensible partnership we've set up with Rwanda. Yes, it may take a while to get working properly, but it doesn't mean we're not going to keep going.
During the day, more than 250 asylum seekers arrived in the UK after crossing the English Channel in small boats. We'll have the latest on the status of that first flight that is due to leave for Rwanda, also tonight. The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, unveils what she calls a refreshed case for independence. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge mark the 5th anniversary of the fire at Grenfell Tower in West London, which claimed 72 lives.
And he hits it hard. He hits it to the cover point boundary.
And a thrilling win for England as they beat New Zealand by 5 wickets to take the Test series.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, Serena's back. Williams says she'll make her return at Wimbledon after pulling out with injury last year.
Welcome to BBC News at 10. There's a last-minute legal battle underway to stop a flight from the UK from taking asylum seekers to Rwanda. It was due to leave a military airport in the UK this evening, removing dozens of people. But a series of legal challenges mean that there will be no more than just a few people on board, among them Iraqi Kurds and Iranians. The government insists that the flights are necessary to deter gangs trafficking people across the English Channel. The Church of England says the plans are immoral, and other critics say the flight is unworkable, unethical and extortionately expensive. Our home editor Mark Easton has the latest.
The flight to an uncertain future is now itself uncertain. Just 5 or 6 asylum seekers could still fly now. One was removed following the intervention of the European Court of Human Rights earlier. And Home Office lawyers now think a judge in Strasbourg will overturn the decision of British courts and stop the plane tonight. The government says today provided more than 300 reasons why the Rwanda flight should have been allowed to depart. That's how many asylum seekers arrived in Dover, having attempted to cross the channel in small boats from France. The government brands them illegal migrants, deems them inadmissible for sanctuary in Britain, and in a bid to deter them, threatens them with forcible relocation to East Africa. One of those on today's passenger list was an Iranian Kurd who'd been held at this immigration detention centre near Heathrow. We spoke to him just before he learned that his appeal against removal had been turned down.
Since I learned that I am among those to be deported to Rwanda, I hardly can communicate and eat. I can't sleep. I am restless. I prefer die here not to be transferred to Rwanda. It is shocking.
The Prime Minister told the Cabinet this morning that the policy goes ahead, suggesting that lawyers trying to stop the flight were supporting criminals.
What the criminal gangs are doing and what those who effectively are abetting the work of the criminal gangs are doing is undermining people's confidence in the safe and legal system, undermining people's general acceptance of immigration.
Rejecting a last-minute appeal to stop the Rwanda flight, the President of the Supreme Court, Lord Reid, pointedly defended those lawyers who challenged the policy.
In bringing that application, the appellant's lawyers were performing the proper function of ensuring that their clients are not subjected to unlawful treatment at the hands of the government.
A poll conducted yesterday suggests the Rwanda policy divides Britain. 44% said they supported the idea, 40% opposed it, with the split along party lines. 74% of Tory voters were in favour, 71% of Labour voters were against. In political terms, it's what they call a wedge issue, a policy designed to divide opinion along party lines. And with the Prime Minister's personal popularity within his own party currently low, it's just what Boris Johnson needs right now.
For whatever reason, migrants are prepared to leave the comparative safety of France to endure perilous journeys to make it to the UK. Unless you're prepared to say, actually, it's not worth it making that journey, you're better off staying in France where you can claim asylum and live a good life there, then migrants will continue to make that journey.
But all the bishops in the House of Lords have condemned the Rwanda deal as an immoral policy that shames Britain.
It is about the moral principle of saying, we are not dealing with this, we are outsourcing it to another nation. Whatever the issues are, go away, your future lives will be sorted out there, not here. That is immoral.
Convoys of police vehicles are still at RAF Boscombe Down tonight to guard the remaining asylum seekers and protect the Rwanda-bound aircraft. There is fury at the Home Office that months of planning and millions of pounds have been spent on a programme that looks to have been stopped in its tracks by a late-night judge in another country. Mark Easton, BBC News.
Well, the flights to Rwanda are meant to act as a deterrent aimed at those trying to cross the English Channel in boats. But today, as we mentioned earlier, at least 250 more people made that journey. In Rwanda, the government there has defended its deal to take in asylum seekers from the UK, saying it was neither immoral nor a punishment. Our senior Africa correspondent Anne Soy reports now from the Rwandan capital, Kigali.
This was home for orphans of the 1994 genocide. They lived here until recently. Then they were moved to an unknown location to make way for the asylum seekers from the UK, we are told. The hostel is now refurbished. The Rwandan government says it's ready for use. The plan is, once the asylum seekers come here, they will be handed over to the Rwandan government. It will assume full responsibility over them, and it will be processing their claims of asylum under Rwandan and applicable international laws. And they will be given three options: to stay here permanently or to return to their home countries. The third option is to go to a third country. How that works isn't clear yet. The deal is a source of pride for the government, despite the global condemnation.
We're doing this for the right reasons. We have the experience. We want Rwanda to be a welcoming place for people in precarious conditions, and we're determined to make this work.
Unlike in the UK, the plan is not the subject of much public debate here in Kigali. Unsurprising, critics say, in a context of limited freedoms.
Why is the UK rejecting them? Here in Rwanda, we want them to come. We welcome them. We are just one people.
I think that's very nice. That's very nice as Rwanda, because, as I said, we're welcoming everyone to come and contribute to the development of the country. So if they can join the other population to build Rwanda, to invest, to do the jobs, I think that's fine.
For providers of the accommodation, it's good business, all funded by Britain, which is to also give £120 million to the government here for development projects. There's clear benefit to Rwanda, but at what cost to those seeking safety? Anne Soy, BBC News, Kigali.
Well, for the latest on what is going on, let's talk to our political editor, Chris Mason, who's at Westminster. Chris, what are you being told now about the latest status on this flight and the state of this policy?
Huw, I can tell you that just in the last couple of minutes, the Home Office have confirmed to me that this flight will not be departing this evening. It was due to leave in around about 20 minutes' time at 10:30. Just a couple of hours ago, there were still 7 asylum seekers due to fly. That then fell to 6 after an intervention from the European Court. As recently as 15 minutes ago, it was down to 4. And in just the last couple of minutes, a confirmation It is now zero. The government very frustrated, particularly frustrated at the intervention of the European Court so shortly before this plane was to go. They remain absolutely determined and committed, though, to this policy. Boris Johnson suggesting earlier today he is willing to change the law. It's worth looking back. I have been looking back tonight at the Conservative manifesto from the last election, where they promised they would update the Human Rights Act. That's a bit of legislation 24 years old now, which is connected to the European Convention on Human Rights. The Conservatives want to loosen it. They feel that gold-plated some of the European Court's rules. They want to loosen it. I think we'll hear about that in the coming days and weeks. One final point, Huw, about public opinion. We've heard lots of people with big voices and big platforms from which to articulate their opposition, from archbishops to, we hear privately, the heir to the throne. When you look at public opinion, it is much more nuanced on this. And broadly speaking, opinion polls suggest there is greater support for this government policy than there is opposition. Boris Johnson determined to press ahead with it.
Chris, many thanks once again. Chris Basin there, our political editor at Westminster. Now, the First Minister of Scotland has announced a new drive for independence, insisting there is a strong and compelling case for Scotland to leave the United Kingdom. Nicola Sturgeon said she believed the Scottish Parliament had a mandate for calling a referendum, and she urged Westminster to respect that. Downing Street says now is not the time for another poll, and it says that people across Scotland want to see both governments working together. Our Scotland editor James Cook has the story.
Many seasons have rolled by since Scotland rejected independence, and the landscape has changed. We've had a pandemic, a cost of living crisis, and Brexit, which was rejected by a majority of voters in Scotland.
It has affected us in so many different ways.
Sally Williams says dragging the nation out of the EU against its wishes has been a disaster.
It really boils down to governance and my belief that the Scottish Parliament is the best place to govern Scotland. The damage that's been done by COVID, by Brexit, by everything else, in a funny way, it's probably the perfect time for us to then get on and build ourselves back out of it, again using our own levers, our own tools.
Nicola Sturgeon agrees, of course. Her new paper argues that the UK is failing Scotland because comparable countries are richer, happier and more equal.
The great question before us is this. If all of these countries can and do use the powers of independence to create wealthier and fairer societies, why not Scotland?
But how? The only undisputed route to a referendum is for the Prime Minister to transfer the power to hold one to Holyrood, using what's called a Section 30 order.
I don't know whether he'll be watching or not, but if he is, I make it clear again, Prime Minister, I stand ready to negotiate a Section 30 order if you decide that you now are a Democrat.
There's no sign of the Prime Minister agreeing to that request. He says the Union sees Scotland through tough times.
That, by the way, is the firepower of the UK exchequer. That's the firepower of our single UK treasury, and I think it's a great thing. We should keep going with it.
It being the 315-year-old union of the nations on either side of this river, a union rooted in commerce. Brexit may have strengthened the political case for independence, the democratic case, but critics say it's weakened the economic argument. They're worried about what would happen to trade across this border if Scotland voted to leave the UK. That's why this gin maker has switched sides.
So this is Lingen.
Ross Jameson voted for independence 8 years ago.
Do you want to smell it?
But now he says he's started a business and sobered up. What does that experience of Brexit tell you about independence for Scotland?
I'm a proud Scotsman. I think the idea of independence, if you stand there again, top of the hill with your kilt, having a wee dram, is brilliant. But the reality of it, especially now through the experience of Brexit, I honestly believe it would be a disaster for the country.
But that's far from a settled view in this divided nation. James Cook, BBC News, on the River Tweed.
And for more information and analysis on this story, you can head to our website, bbc.co.uk/news, and follow the links there to more analysis. Now, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have laid a wreath at the foot of Grenfell Tower in West London as people mark the 5th anniversary of the fire, which claimed 72 lives. Survivors call for justice for the bereaved and more immediate action to tackle the threat posed by flammable cladding, which still affects tower blocks across Britain. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons has more details.
Now, in their honour, we will observe a 72-second silence.
The people who called Grenfell home were scattered by the disaster. They returned today, alongside them neighbours and supporters, to remember friends and relatives lost to the flames. But this event was also about the survivors. 8-year-old Aisha among them.
Never forget. I will never forget the fire. I will never forget the smoke. I will never forget the sirens. I will never forget how scary the fire was. I will never forget how worrying the fire was. I will never forget that I survived. We can't change the past, but we can change the future. Never forget.
The community group Grenfell United said today, "We don't want our 72 to be remembered for what happened, but for what changed. Safer buildings, of course, but also justice."
5 years have passed and still we have not heard the click of a single pair of handcuffs.
But alongside an exhaustive public inquiry, there has been a massive police investigation.
I've sometimes been shocked at what I've heard, but what I can say is there is nothing which is being heard at the public inquiry which we, from our criminal investigation perspective, are not already aware of.
Only when the public inquiry produces its final report will criminal charges even be considered. Many in this area believe that the tower should stay exactly as it is until people go to prison. But for many survivors, the agony of the wait has made the healing harder.
I've always said that, Grenfell was a tragedy in 3 acts, the way we were treated before, the events of the night and what happened afterwards. If there had been some criminal convictions, if people that lived in social housing were never going to be treated the way that we were treated, if there was no one going to bed at night with the same cladding as Grenfell on their buildings, that would be something, but none of that has happened, and that's why it's so painful.
Because people here say, this is not over until justice is done. Tom Simons, BBC News at Grenfell Tower.
And you can see a special programme. It's called Grenfell, Has Anything Changed? It's available now on the BBC iPlayer at bbc.co.uk/iPlayer or via the iPlayer app on your smart device. Now, as we reported last night, Russian forces are making progress in eastern Ukraine, where fighting has reached a new intensity. Tonight, we report from Kharkiv in the northeast of the country, a city bombarded by Russian shelling, but surrounding territory has been retaken by Ukrainian troops. The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor has been in the city to see the devastation for himself, and he said the court would prosecute the highest ranks of Russians responsible for any war crimes. Our correspondent Wira Davis has sent this report.
With this city still under daily attack,
so there was an airstrike.
Karim Khan's visit to Kharkiv was more a statement of intent than gathering evidence.
This particular unit, what were the age of the children that normally used to?
That will come later. The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor toured several badly damaged parts of the city, including a primary school, which is being used as a shelter when it was hit by Russian shelling. Civilians were killed here. From the start of the war, Russia's been accused of indiscriminate shelling and rocket attacks. This children's hospital peppered with lethal shrapnel from internationally prohibited cluster bombs. One of many such incidents which led to calls for the International Criminal Court to act. This ICC investigation into alleged war crimes in Ukraine has already been fast-tracked, and Mr. Khan has said that they will look into allegations of atrocities by either side. But if the evidence points to the higher levels of the Russian military or politics, that is where they will follow. Khan's team has already set up base in Kiev, and 42 investigators are already on the ground. But this was his first visit to the Eastern Front.
I will keep on trying to engage with the Russian Federation, because I think any state that wishes to fly the flag of democracy and legality should have nothing to hide and nothing to fear.
Mr. Khan didn't have time to stop and talk as he walked past Irina's shell-damaged apartment, but she's in no doubt who his investigation should find accountable.
Putin and his cronies. We Ukrainians have already condemned them. This is not the way to do things. We are brothers. We are supposed to respect each other. Why are they attacking us?
Irina will have to be patient. The war isn't over, and investigations of this magnitude take time. Cooperation from Moscow is also unlikely to be forthcoming. Bora Davis, BBC News, Kharkiv.
The number of job vacancies in the UK has hit a new record high of 1.3 million, mainly due to older workers choosing to retire early during the pandemic. The Chancellor says the UK jobs market remains robust, but Labour has accused the government of utter complacency about the high number of people choosing not to work. Other figures out today show how pay rises are falling behind the soaring rate of inflation. Let's join our economics editor Faisal Islam, who's here to explain a little more. Faisal?
Thanks, Huw. Well, it's a mixed picture. The good news is that unemployment is close to historic lows, reflecting the success of pandemic support measures. At 3.8%, it's one of the lowest levels in half a century, but the smallest signs that it's starting to tick back up again in the very latest data. However, take a look at this. Vacancies in the economy hit another record, this time 1.3 million, more than the population of Birmingham, with hundreds of thousands of missing workers, reflecting those retiring during the pandemic, the long-term ill and fewer European workers post-Brexit under new immigration rules. Though this is the consequence of a rebound from the pandemic, the impact of all that is becoming material, contributing to visible problems at our airports, in NHS hospital waiting rooms, and in our cleaning companies too.
There are around 200,000 unfilled cleaning vacancies, and now more workers from abroad are required, says this cleaning company boss.
We believe we're around 15% down. I would describe it as a crisis because the simple fact is it's getting worse. There simply isn't enough staff to go around. So in that regard, we really need to sit with government and look at all opportunities to bring people into the country. If we don't, then you're running the risk that standards reduce and reduce.
While some of these pressures have helped push up cash wages, for those in jobs, a very sharp squeeze is on. On average, wage rises seem quite strong, up 6.8% on the year. Strip out bonuses, mainly though not exclusively in the banking sector, and we're down to just over 4%. But then apply inflation to get the real terms increase, and it's almost wiped out, close to zero growth in total pay. And without bonuses, it's down 2.2% in real terms, the lowest figure for a decade, and significantly less than that for public sector workers. So the jobs figures showing workers in high demand, but high inflation watering down the value of wage rises. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
The airline industry and the government must both shoulder the responsibility for the recent chaos seen at airports. Head of the consumer group Which told a parliamentary committee at Westminster that staff shortages had been underestimated, leading to thousands of flight cancellations and long queues at airports. Well, our transport correspondent Katie Austin is with me to explain a little more. Katie?
Yes, Huw, most people have got away without major problems, but you'll probably have seen pictures of long queues at some airports and heard about flight cancellations. So far in June, more than 900 flights leaving the UK have been cancelled, most of them in advance, and EasyJet has had the highest number. There have been various causes of disruption, and problems are happening elsewhere in Europe too, but aviation staff shortages are a big underlying factor. The industry shed many jobs during the pandemic, including 30,000 at airlines. Now some firms have struggled to hire again quickly as demand has risen. It's not all about cabin crew. There are other workers like baggage handlers which are in short supply, and that was a reason tour operator TUI cancelled dozens of flights from Manchester this month. Here's what they said today.
We needed to be confident we could operate, and that the baggage system in particular at Manchester was one of the primary causes for the delay, because the bags couldn't be loaded before the crew went out of hours because there was such a delay in loading the bags. We learnt our lesson. We're building more resilience in terms of things that we can influence.
Experts say hiring challenges are partly down to people having left the sector for other jobs, and as Faisal was just saying, it's an extremely tight labour market at the moment. British Airways, which has cut 10% from its schedules until October, said today 3,000 new hires were still waiting for security clearance, and it was taking up to 140 days to get people through. Ground handling firm Swissport said it was taking 60 to 90 days to get people airside passes, and the airport's trade body said some people are quitting while they wait to start the job.
The system is speeding up a little bit, but there certainly were delays, and it took much longer when recruitment really kicked in. So we do, as airports, there are still, I would say, several hundreds of people who are still awaiting that final clearance.
Now, this afternoon, the aviation regulator and the Department for Transport told airlines to review their schedules for the rest of the summer again to ensure they can deliver them, saying cancellations as early as possible were better than late notice on the day. They also said consumers must be dealt with properly when disruption does happen. Huw.
Katie, many thanks again. Katie Austin there, our transport correspondent. Well, let's go to football then, and England, Wales and Scotland have been in action this evening in the UEFA Nations League. Scotland recovered from a bit of a rocky start to beat Armenia 4-1. Wales were seconds away from drawing with the Netherlands, who then scored to make it 3-2. And it was a pretty bad night for England, who lost 4-0 at home to Hungary, the side's biggest margin of defeat at home since 1928. Austin Hailwood reports. To the cricket, big hitting century from Johnny Bairstow steered England to a stunning win in the second test against New Zealand at Trent Bridge. Bairstow made the second fastest century by an England batsman in the history of Test cricket, and in doing so helped seal the series for England. Our correspondent Andy Swiss was watching the play.
It was as breathtaking as it was brilliant. England's new captain Ben Stokes sealing a victory which almost beggared belief. Earlier, the fans had flocked to Trent Bridge, every age, every hairstyle, hoping for some heroics. But chasing 299 to win, those hopes seemed to be fading as New Zealand took 4 early wickets.
Gone! He's chipped it straight back to Trent Bolt.
But just when England needed something special, enter Johnny Bairstow with one of the most blistering displays you'll ever see. He clobbered New Zealand to all corners of Nottingham, reaching his century in just 77 balls, the second fastest Test 100 ever by an Englishman. And at the other end, Stokes was doing what Stokes does. One gravity-defying 6 as he thrashed a half-century. It was mayhem.
That is an enormous 6.
By the time Bairstow fell for a staggering 136, Trent Bridge rose as one and England were on the brink. And moments later, Stokes blazed his team to glory. Victory, and with it the series. England's new era is off to some start.
Well, for the lucky fans that were here, it's been a day of quite exhilarating entertainment. Rarely has English cricket seen a more remarkable victory. Andy Swiss, BBC News, Trent Bridge.
Andy, in rather glorious sunshine there. Let's join Matt for the weather. It looked nice, didn't it?
It did, warming up as well. But the weather's not very even-handed across the UK this week, as I'm about to show you. Certainly that was the case today. Look at these skies in Cambridgeshire from one of our weather watchers. This was seen across much of England and Wales. Different story, though, as we look towards Scotland and Northern Ireland. This was Argyll and Bute. Grey skies, and those contrasts are going to remain in some form as we go through the rest of this week. Let's look at some of those contrasts. Rainfall, for instance. This chart shows how the rainfall tots up. Darker colours here, maybe an inch or two of rain in the Western Isles. Look, no rain at all for England and Wales all the way through to Friday, but it's here where the heat will peak at its greatest. By Friday, we could see temperatures widely central eastern England, 30 to 33 Celsius. 33 is 91 in Fahrenheit. That's a few days away. It's a little bit fresh out there tonight across some parts of England and Wales with clear skies. Not so much across Scotland, Northern Ireland. Plenty of cloud around, some outbreaks of rain into the morning. And indeed, we're going to see rain come and go all day long again across the north and west of Scotland. And Northern Ireland, after a bright start, the cloud will increase here. Probably a wetter afternoon than we've seen through today. Away from that, the odd shower may crop up on the Peak District, maybe Snowdonia as the cloud starts to increase, but still some sunny spells. Bluest of the skies further south, and already 27 degrees there in central London. Most spots a degree or so above average. And even where you've got the cloud, pollen levels are increasing across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Highest though for England and Wales once again under this area of high pressure which is dominating the weather charts to the south and east. That's what's keeping things dry here, eventually tapping into the warmth in France. But weather fronts, low pressure, never too far away from Scotland, Northern Ireland. So again on Thursday, further spots of rain around, maybe something wetter to Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland later on. Temperatures by this stage more widely in the mid to high 20s, and humidity levels are increasing, and you'll certainly notice that by night. Into Thursday night, Friday morning, these are the temperatures to expect by the end of the night. Tough night to get some sleep, at least out there at the moment. It's fresher, and just before I go, if you do have clear skies, it's a full moon tonight. Big super moon out there, something to enjoy as you walk home. But
certainly, Mulbat. Thank you very much. Matt Taylor there for us. And that's BBC News at 10 on Tuesday, the 14th of June. Now, don't forget, there's more analysis of the day's main stories. That's on Newsnight with my colleague Mark Urban. That's just about getting underway on BBC Two. And Mark will have more details for us when the cameras settle down on that aircraft that's meant to take off for Rwanda. It's meant to go tonight, but it's now probably going to go tomorrow. And of course, right across the UK, in the nations and regions, all of our colleagues standing by very smartly with the news where you are. But from the 10 o'clock team, thanks for watching. Good night.